evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Happy Tuesday. Sometime in the last 10 years, the people who run New York City stopped caring about the millions of American citizens who live in New York City. How do we know that? We know that from watching what happened to the city. Ignore what they say, watch what they do. So shortly after Bill de Blasio became mayor in 2014, for example, a huge number of drug addicts and mental patients began living on the sidewalks. That's not good. And it increased. Over time, there was a 65% increase in homelessness in New York City. The streets, not surprisingly, got visibly dirtier. The smell got much stronger. Been there this month? Public urination was decriminalized by Bill de Blasio, and many people took advantage of their new freedoms. And there was, of course, a lot more crime. After local politicians pledged to cut law enforcement by $1 billion a year, many cops decided it wasn't worth enforcing the law. Too much risk, not enough reward. So the number of police stops declined by more than 90%. So what happened to burglaries? Oh, they jumped 40%. Car thefts by almost 70%. Shootings doubled. So what would it be like to live in a place like that? Well, for many in New York, life just became intolerable, and a huge number of people simply left. Not that anyone in the mayor's office seemed to notice their departure. Average New Yorkers noticed. They understood perfectly well that city government had no interest in their well-being. But that did not mean that local politicians stopped caring. Oh, they cared more than ever. They just cared about different people. New York's political class shifted its focus from concern over citizens, that was their old constituency, to deep concern about illegal aliens, whom they considered the future. As the new mayor of New York, Eric Adams, explained during his campaign, when a foreign national breaks federal law to come to New York, that person must be rewarded with lavish, publicly funded services. Watch.
Think about it. The days I spent with our essential employees, a substantial number of them were undocumented. They were delivering our Uber Eats. They were stocking our stores. They were out in the streets, keeping our city running. Let's have immediate translation services to assist that people can have access to the services that are already available. We have to expand NYC Care to make sure everyone has health care. We need to make sure we have proper translation services in our schools so that we can start building out the future as well. And I too take my hat off to the state Senate. That was the right thing to do, because when an immigrant walks into the store and buy a loaf of bread, no one asks, what is your documentation?
Yeah. Exactly. Whatever you want. Driver's licenses, publicly funded sex changes, anything. Giving non-citizens, lawbreakers, whatever they want is the right thing to do, said Eric Adams, as the entire Upper East Side packed its bags to move to Palm Beach County. But illegal aliens must be catered to. Free transportation, translators, any language you want, health care, voting rights. There can be no limit to what we give to illegal aliens because they are good people, and we are not. Muriel Bowser, the similarly incompetent Democratic mayor of Washington, D.C., strongly agreed with this. Illegal aliens must get everything they asked for, she said, and some things they've never asked for, including the city's assistance avoiding arrest for the crimes they've committed. Watch Muriel Bowser.
In Washington, D.C., we value our diversity and inclusivity, and being a sanctuary city means that we are not an agent of the federal government. It means that our police will focus on serving D.C. residents, protecting and serving them no matter their immigration status.
Hi, I'm Muriel Bowser, the mayor of Washington, D.C. Here in the nation's capital, we support the thousands of immigrants, green card holders, dreamers, and those with temporary protective status who make our communities better.
We celebrate every immigrant who is now a part of our D.C. community. We celebrate those seeking citizenships and those who are not, and those who are still trying to navigate and figure out what's best for them and their families. We stand together and say, no matter what your plan is, D.C. is here for you.
Muriel Bowser meant it so sincerely that she hired people in leotards to stage interpretive dance to celebrate illegal aliens. All this played out during the Trump administration. Sitting at home in seclusion in Delaware during the presidential campaign, Joe Biden was watching all of this, mouth open as he ate his Jell-O, nodding vigorously. Every Democrat in the country seemed to agree with this. Illegal aliens are holy because diversity is our strength.
Our diversity is our strength, and our unity is our power.
And I say to them, our diversity is our strength.
Our diversity
It is still and always will be one of our greatest strengths.
Our diversity is one of our greatest strengths.
That when all of God's children come together, we're going to show you that our diversity is our strength.
We share an innate understanding that our diversity is an enormous strength.
They all know the line, except Joe Biden who had to read it just to make sure he got it right. And by the way, how did our former president from Hawaii wind up with a Southern accent? That is one mystery that was never solved after 8 years in office. But whatever, diversity is our strength. And once he became president, Joe Biden promptly put that slogan into practice. How? By opening our borders to the world. And of course, millions of people poured in. This was called the equity agenda. Now, for the country, this was tough and very destabilizing. Millions of brand new people, many of whom who don't speak the language, almost none of whom have an American level education, the largest human wave in our country's history at exactly the moment when the country can least afford it. So it was tough, but naturally, many of these new arrivals gravitated to our biggest city, New York, because they were welcome there. They saw the new mayor and the old mayor, the mayor before that mayor, all talking about how welcome they were in New York. So they went there. What happened then? Well, that's interesting. Here's the new mayor of New York, Eric Adams, from last week. Now watch this and see if you can detect a difference from the first Eric Adams clip we showed you about illegal aliens. Here he is.
We're reaching out to the federal government and stating this is a real burden on New Yorkers as we're trying to do the right thing. We already, as I stated, we already have an overburdened shelter system. So now we're talking about, as you stated, food, clothing, school. This is going to impact our schools because we do not turn away individuals because they're undocumented. Translation services. There's just a whole host of things that this is going to produce, and that's why we need help.
Wait a second. He's complaining about the cost of translation services. But 20 minutes ago during his campaign, he was telling us we have to pay for translation services, but it turns out that functional states, the federal government, now has to pay for translation services and schools and shelters and a host of other costs because illegal aliens may be great in theory. We love them, but in practice, illegal aliens are expensive. Eric Adams just learned that. It turns out that importing millions of poor people doesn't actually make you richer. As you just heard Adams put it, this is a real burden on New Yorkers, the ones who are still there. Now, to be fair to Eric Adams, he's not the only sub-genius who is having this realization tonight. Muriel Bowser of Washington, D.C. is having it too. Remember her plan to run a sanctuary city that's open to, quote, every immigrant? How's that going? Well, here's an update.
How significant is this influx? How many people?
Well, this is a very significant issue. We have for sure called on the federal government to work across state lines to prevent people from really being tricked into getting on buses. But I fear that they're being tricked into nationwide bus trips when their final destinations are places all over the United States of America.
Oh, they're being tricked to come to a city that invited them and promised them every conceivable service, including legal defense against our own government for breaking our laws. They're being tricked. Okay.
Washington's mayor has requested the activation of the D.C. National Guard to help with migrants who are arriving there by bus. For months, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has been chartering buses to send migrants to Washington, D.C. and other so-called sanctuary cities. But aid groups say there are not enough resources available. The mayor says the situation has now reached a tipping point.